everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bobble Pod. On this episode, we're going to be talking about how does HR make agencies more agile and innovative. And today I'm joined by Georgie. Am I saying that correct?
Yes.
I'm always scared. Georgie. Georgie's like from...
Don't worry, I've had Georgina, Gemma, my whole life. So yeah, it's Georgia.
Well, meet James, hashtag Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
Our audio guy.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks. Oh, thanks, mate.
Appreciate that.
Before we begin, as always, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello YouTube, please click on the bell notification button. And if you find it in your hearts, all the behind the scenes clips and all the little snippets are on the official at Mr. Bobble official at handles across TikTok and Instagram. So do give us a follow. So let's get straight into it. So Georgia, tell me what you do. We've met quite a few times. We're connected on LinkedIn. We actually had a catch up about a month ago or something.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago.
It wasn't too long ago. And then I was like, please come on my podcast. And then she said yes. And now we're here. So tell our listeners, our followers, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I own Access HR, which is an independent dynamic HR consultancy. So we support founders who are fast scaling, growing businesses. So what we do is basically specialize in building and aligning people strategies with the business goals to support sustainable growth. So all in all, HR consultancy is where we are.
Yeah, from an owner's point of view, I only see HR as like, how can I fire someone and how's he going to save money? And that's how you help business owners. It's quite good. Well, I mean, not quite good. I mean, I retract some statements there. I mean, we're a very good employer at Bobble Digital. We currently have a role available, SEO manager. Do apply. But no.
It comes more back to what's solution, being solution orientated. Like, I'll never say no to a client, but what I will do is I'll tell you the risk. So if you did want to terminate somebody, I'll tell you the risk of doing it and how you can get around it. You make that indecision, that's on you, not me.
I say no all the time. Can we do this? No. Why? Because it's going to cost me money. No, I'm joking. No, but you have to say no. I always say this to clients, is we're not a bunch of yes people. So if you tell us to do something and we disagree with it, we'll do it. Sometimes you do bend the rules. Everyone does that. But that just ends up in a bad relationship with the client because you just set expectations that are unrealistic. But yeah, James has got some really good questions for us to rattle off.
I love the phrase, if you want to terminate someone. That sounds quite final. That's a little bit, dramatic. I like that.
What's your that's the normal.
I mean, terminate someone's contract. Was it if to terminate someone?
No, I'm not the terminator.
There's no coming back from being terminated.
No, terminating their contract.
George's like, I'll be back.
So what's your journey been then to what you do now?
My journey really starts in 2017, finished university, studied criminology, and I knew one thing. I didn't want to be a police officer.
Right.
I didn't want to be a criminal lawyer, anything like that. But I wanted to have quite a purposeful job within the legal realm. But I'm not academic. I'm not academic at all. So I was like, how can I get there without doing like the 7 years in industry? Lo and behold, I fell into HR, which I think everybody falls into HR. No one grows up going, oh, I want to be an HR professional when I'm older. So I naturally fell into it because I actually needed a job to go traveling. And this was a temp maternity job, HR admin role. And I've been there 8 years in terms of the industry. And I was simply frustrated at how traditional, like you were saying, around, we're just seen as quite like reactionary. If you want something to happen, you call someone, they make it happen. And I saw such a gap, and it was so far removed from the modern employee, the modern workforce is how agile and dynamic businesses are. So I was like, we need to shake this up a little bit and have an actual modern approach. So that's why I then started my own business and having a consultancy doing it, where we're more dynamic. I'm not traditional as a person, so to be traditional in my practices, like, it would just be so wrong for me, yeah.
I love how she did criminology and we talked about terminating people. I'm saying.
There's a thread in there.
There's something linked into that.
Honestly, I just watched one too many crime documentaries.
What is it about?
And then I was like, oh, I could do this, because I actually first applied to uni to do international business, because, you know, that's what you should do really when you grow up. But I just watched one too many crime series and I was like, criminology, that's for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm a little scared now. No, that's a great. I've actually seen a lot of your content, and obviously I like and share and engage with your. I always like to try and. I always say it costs nothing to like and comment positively on someone's post. Especially when someone's trying to build a company, and you're breaking a lot of barriers into your industry as well in terms of age, the way you're looking at HR, which is completely different. Which I like that approach. It's more than anything else.
It's got a bad rep, hasn't it? HR
Horrific.
Same as recruitment.
I like the business I used to work at. When the director of HR turned up, everyone had try and hide under their desk. It was never for anything good. It was always something bad's happening because the director of HR's here. So what do you, from a practical point of view, then what do you do differently then? How are you? It sounds like you've been quite disruptive in that space. What does that look like in HR then? What is disruption in HR?
Disruption is HR is actually building an employee experience as part of a business strategy. Rather than going in and being super reactive, one of the first things I do with a client is making sure that they have a solid business strategy. They know where they're going, who they want to be and what they want to stand for, and building a people strategy around that and the employee experience. And going back to what I consider quite the basics, so like getting really personable and making it a bespoke solution for that specific team in that environment. Like you can't go in on a one size fits all because every team is different, demographics, dynamics, all of that. So it's building it more as a business strategy, meeting the commercial goals and actually making an experience that people want at work. We spend so much of our time at work. So why are we actually not creating a good experience where people can feel fulfilled?
A good point. But with the modern day of working with people wanting to work more from home, how do you recreate that?
You tap into what an experience means for them. So a bunch of questions I love to ask, especially for remote teams and hybrid teams, is around what is your preferred communication style? What's your learning style? How do you like to be rewarded? How do you like to be recognized? What does transparency mean to you? And just going back to those basic questions that we're all missing, that we're all forgotten about, so that we know. And rather than doing, like I said, a one size fits all, if you know that Georgia's preferred communication style is X, then you tailor that to her. And you customize to each person within your team.
How does a small business tailor it to when they've just got 6-7 staff?
That's quite easy though, because you've only got 6-7 staff who you'll have to talk to.
No, but how do you create an experience individual to them and you want to create team cohesiveness? If someone only communicates and let's say you want to do a team night out, but everyone has a different view and one's introverted, one's extroverted and one wants to do this kind of activity and one just wants to read a book. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you then tailor it without ostracizing them and keeping that whole team together? If you know what I'm getting at, it's like, and get the whole idea of personalizing it. And I agree, but it's like, what happens if you're over personalizing it? Do they just still get stuck in their bubble? How do you bring
when you're talking to them around the communication styles, you always bring it back to where the business is going and what you're trying to achieve. So being realistic with budget, what we've got. What most of my clients do is they typically have two sort of events. If you're talking about what people would want to do, one typically is alcohol fueled, a annual awards night or something like that. And then outside of that, for people who aren't driven by alcohol as an event, there are different tailored events where it doesn't consume alcohol because that's what people want. Or as an example, if you've got a family, people don't always want to travel into city centres. They want something more local. You can do a blend of both, but being really realistic and saying, hey guys, I need you to come together in your communication style of two. Here are two ideas that we thought about, or 3 or 4, and pulling it in that way.
But what happens if one team just want to go to the alcohol food one and doesn't want to go to the family event one? Are you not creating potential divisions in the company? Does it do the opposite of what you want to achieve because you want everyone to communicate together? That's my only question around it, really, or my viewpoint from it. But I get it. It's like, if you have someone who's, very introverted, doesn't like the fuel night out party, but prefers, reading or listening to audiobooks, then you can say, right, why don't you lead on a book club for the company? You might like that. Find other people that like that and do that. But then is he only going to communicate, or he or they, or she's only going to communicate with that group and only get involved in that group, how do you get them if that's say none of their wider team are involved in that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you. I'd say it's all around the communication of expectations. So say if you do have somebody who leads a particular forum, a book club, something specialized within the business, communicate your expectations around teamwork. What typically you will have as a business are values anyway, and most of the time there is one value around teamwork and how we collaborate together and how we communicate together. That is what I would also just pull back in with the team, because yes, you can have customized approaches, but at the end of the day, there's a business strategy, there's commercial goals that we need to hit, and to do that we all need to work as a collective, not just an individual contributor. So it's just pulling them back in a little bit with your expectations.
Does that only work for businesses up to a certain size then, or is that scalable to quite big businesses as well, do you think?
Scalable to quite big businesses.
Do you think, and I'm just going to ask this as it's in my head, do particularly bigger businesses, do they just need someone that they're scared of? Like that idea of the HR manager that they're all a little bit afraid of, who's like the bad guy. Once you've got a lot of people that are all kind of fighting for their corner in terms of their preference about how things are done, does it need someone that's just like the bad guy in the room that says, this is how it's going to work?
No, I wouldn't say that they do. The role of an HR function is for 3 areas specifically. So we influence business performance, we build the employee experience, and we make sure that the business is still there in 12 months' time through efficiency and compliance. Historically, we have been the bad guy around this, and this is where the language needs to change predominantly. Like we are moving more towards like people and culture. Our role isn't to be the smokescreen. It's to move the business forward and to be an enabler of business. Also, we're not the decision makers. Like when we were talking earlier, our role is to advise and manage and mitigate risk. So for an industry to be seen as the bad guy just to get something over the line, you're creating the wrong culture within a business if that's what you're using.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's a good answer. Let's bring agencies specifically then into the conversation, because I think agencies, perhaps more than other businesses, can be quite diverse in terms of their workforce.
Understatement.
And where you have creativity, you have complex people sometimes, perhaps difficult people sometimes. So how do you support agencies then? How does that work?
Agencies are my favourite client to support because...
This is your pitch to me now.
Here we go. This is my time to shine, guys. So what I love about agencies is how dynamic and agile the environments are, not just from a way that you serve clients in agencies and partnering with brands, but how creative and dynamic the team are on the inside as well. They want more agile practices. It's a very fast-paced environment, and that allows for a lot more creativity from a people experience lens as well. And one of the biggest things with an agency is you are always ahead of the curve. There's a lot of competition now, but you've got to have that on the inside, not just on the external too.
Yeah, this is a nail on the head. Agencies, we call ourselves an Agile digital marketing agency. Agile is actually in our approach and title. So it actually really makes sense for us. Yeah, we've got, people that do like the SEO function are very technically driven, but then can be very content driven. So it can be very creative. It can be very data analytic focused, and you can have that in one team. You see, because of the function of what it is and how it relates to like PR. Then you've got paid media, which again is just very dynamic in terms of like from social media and understanding social etiquette to, messaging through to, understanding performance, what works, what not works. Again, technical, understanding everything from e-commerce to lead generation. So you need people that can't just fit within one kind of individual dynamic in terms of personality. They need to be able to branch off to different elements, really. So it's not easy being an agency owner because for me, I'm able to do all of that. I'm very data driven. I'm very strategically focused. I'm very creative in my approach. I'm very direct. I'm very innovative. I'm very agile. I'm very fast paced, as Laura can probably struggles to keep up with me. So I'm all the characters within my agency, but then different departments have one or two others. What you tend to find in agencies, I think more now as it's become a lot more prevalent, is those people that suffer with like dyslexia, ADHD, autism to a degree are the ones that actually are specific within a certain area in terms of either data or creativity or in terms of account management. And that's why it's very dynamic and agile.
I completely agree with that. Like a lot of my clients, their internal team are neurodivergent as well. So building HR practices that are neurodivergent friendly is really important because it also stimulates and enables their creativity and innovation as well. So that's what we build through the employee experience because that underpins the business.
And that's the challenge, especially when you're small agencies. Like, how do you bring your staff together? How do you support staff individually? Some are motivated by other things. Some staff are always motivated by money. I was always, when I was into marketing, they asked me what motivates me. I was like, money. What can I do with that? I work for you. I'm giving you my time. For me, it's my hourly rate, what I can earn. Because if I end up working 18 hours a day for you and I'm only paid 9 to 5, I want to make sure in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, I'm getting a huge uplift because I'm bringing you money and I want to see a piece of that. Mm-hmm. That's what motivates me. Ironically, it was quite funny. We used to do these presentations by different departments at Intermarketing, and I had to do one. It was like, what motivates me? And I said Queen Elizabeth in terms of on the banknote. And it was like, it was the Queen. And other people would come in and said, this book, because they're very creative. I came in a whole presentation of me partying in Miami and what I can do with money and driving a Mustang. I was like, work to live, don't live to work kind of philosophy. I could see some of them. I'm just like, we shouldn't have got him to present because I was telling people, hey, come, earn your money and go. But I'm passionate about what I do. So it was not really a job to me. Obviously, I run my own agency, but back then it was almost like, I like the fact that I turn up in a Mustang because I don't drink. I didn't have a mortgage at the time. I don't do any of that stuff. I was like, for me, these things don't interest me. For me, is if I'm working, I want to make sure I'm getting a nice financial package because that's going to allow me to drive a Mustang on a weekend.
But that's
go
a
on holiday.
Good question to ask you, T.
Yeah,
like what motivates you?
What motivates me is actually what can I do with that? Maybe I want to start setting up investments. And the other thing that motivated me was put me on these projects, let me build a team. I want to continue developing myself. I want to be a future leader, essentially. So that's how it was. But when you talked about HR's getting a bad rep, we were at a charity event over the weekend and I bumped into one of the old HR directors, Lisa Brailford, at the event. And we just reminisced about how it was. But I was only one of the few employees at a team of like 120 that used to go in and just chat with HR because HR and almost like finance were kind of in like one room and you'd have to go to finance to submit your expense sheets. And I used to always have a lot of expenses because I used to travel a lot and do stuff for clients, going down to London and stuff. But I'd stay in there and have a chat with everyone and build that relationship up. And you realise HR just a normal part of the function to the point where the way they did HR is what inspired me in terms of how I treat my staff. In terms of like my kidneys failed, I engaged them, and she even said, "You told us that you were having health issues way in advance." Went through a lot of tests. They kept me up to date. When my kidneys failed, which employer turns around and says, for the next 3 months, don't worry about your wage. We're going to pay you your full-time wage. We don't need to worry about that right now. Take the pressure off because I just started dialysis. And that shows that they cared about. It was that point that I didn't realize, and I said this to Lisa literally over the weekend, I said, you don't realize how much I remember that time in terms of how supportive you and the management team was because I was struggling. And to know that, and the last thing I needed was my company to start thinking, he's ill, you need to push him out, kind of thing. It was the support was like, no, take your time, we've got your back. That's good. That made my recovery easier. it actually made it easy to leave, ironically, because I ended up leaving and setting up Bobble Digital and going forward with that. But it was the best decision for them as well, because I could not give them the old Manny that worked, 15 hours a day. I just couldn't. I could not give that level of, drive and passion, because I nearly died. So perspective of life came into it. And then I didn't really care about stuff like Mustang or money or anything like that. My mindset kind of changed in terms of who I was.
That's interesting. I've always thought, by the way, when you go and work for a reasonably sized business, the people to become friends with, number one, the director of HR or HR manager, that's a very good ally to have on your side.
Yeah.
The head of IT, because you get the new stuff whenever he comes in, and the PA to the chief exec. They're the three people that you want to make friends with in a new business, and you're absolutely fine.
Forgetting a team, reception. I used to be so close to the reception team. We used to go down and just have chats.
No, you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
And it was funny because at one point, and we're going off tangent, is like they asked reception. My boss asked reception if they could go out whilst they were going to go deliver mail, and said, no, you've got to give me your own personal mail. And he only asked them because he knew they'd done it for me. They didn't do it for him.
Nice.
And I was like, pays to make relationships, doesn't it, in the company? So we talked about agencies and stuff. How does it differ for non-agencies? So anyone else who's not an agency listening, and a lot of our listeners are small business owners, how does that approach differ?
The difference is the dynamic. So when you are an agency, typically you're supporting and serving a lot of multiple brands, multiple clients all at once. How you serve them will be very similar, but you've got, again, different businesses, so different dynamics. So you have to be more agile on the inside. Whereas for other businesses who aren't in the agency space, it's completely different in terms of the dynamic. The org structure is completely different. The reporting levels are completely different. You don't typically then have the specialist arm that are in agencies. Like you mentioned, obviously having like SEO and all the different specialist functions. That's the main side. So you've got to be more understanding of how the business works on the inside when you're giving HR advice and how you're building out the strategy. It's completely different in dynamics. One is a lot more agile and super fast paced. The other isn't. It's like I'm working with a few clients at the moment and they're actually describing theirs as quite stale because it doesn't have that fast paced agility in a normal business. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Can I ask you about a specific word?
Yes.
Which is, I think, probably particularly post-pandemics, a word that's been thrown around quite a lot by businesses of all shapes and sizes, and that word is culture. What's your opinion about that? Because it feels to me a little bit almost as if it's a word that's been sort of weaponized, and you've got, everyone's kind of going, we've got amazing culture, our culture is this, our culture is that, our culture is the other. But then I hear from people that work for certain businesses saying, actually, it's a lot of nice words, but the actions don't particularly match it. What's your kind of feeling on that? Because a lot of stuff that we've talked about so far, you could wrap up under the heading of culture, couldn't you?
There is a huge misunderstanding with culture. Culture is about behaviour, so it's how a team behaves with each other. It is also how we feel, which is through the behaviours. So what every business should have is a set of values, and under those values you have behaviours. The behaviours that you allow and you don't allow generates your culture. Yeah, because it's all on behaviours. Culture is also such a buzzword post-COVID. I completely agree. As an HR industry as well, we've moved from being called personnel, who was just like the admin pusher, to HR, which is now just a bit of a smokescreen, really reactive, to being called people and culture, which I strongly disagree with. Because why is the responsibility of culture falling on a job title for HR in the people function? Culture is everyone's responsibility. How we behave is each of our personal responsibility.
It comes from leaders as well. It comes from the top.
It's the biggest influence. So the biggest influence as a culture are your senior leadership team and your middle management layer. Yeah. If they don't have the connection to the business through your values, what you allow, what you don't allow, you're then creating a culture that you never wanted in the first place. And you'll often find it in businesses. Different departments might have different microcultures, and it's behaviours. So it's not culture as a collective, it's behaviours in the business. So when I hear the buzzword, that's why I think there's a massive misunderstanding of what it actually means.
That's a really interesting perspective, yeah. And I totally get where you're coming from with that. That's really interesting. Let me ask you a little bit about. So let's imagine growing agency gets to a point whereby there's an option in terms of whether or not they bring someone in-house to look after their HR versus kind of outsourcing it using someone like you or an equivalent. Give us a little bit of a kind of a pros and cons of those approaches for agencies when they get to that size that they could go in either direction. What's
One of the biggest pros is you get access to specialist expertise. So if you are in a growing agency, you may be going through a bit of a restructure. You may need to invest in your middle management layer as a bit of a training opportunity. You may want to build out your culture, your values. They are all specialist areas within HR. Somebody who is in-house may not have had the experience or awareness or knowledge in those specialist areas. So the biggest pro is if you are a growing agency and there's a specialist area that you want to excel in, you can outsource and get that expertise quite quickly. You don't have to train them. It's quite fast. Another is we're really unbiased. We don't know your business. So if it comes from like an advisory perspective and how to move forward, we don't have any preconceived notion, unconscious bias, anything like that. So you know very well from the start, it's going to be fair and consistent and compliant at the same time as well. They're the two, I would say.
Okay. Manny, what's your kind of approach to HR been?
So right now, it's not internal. Laura takes care of some of our HR function. A lot of it's come from me. We do, I don't know if we call it behaviors, but we have some kind of things that we want the team to do in terms of like, you know, how they behave and how they act in the company in terms of help building that culture. We did share a vision. We do like a 6-month company update. Yeah. And we recently shared our vision in terms of where we are and where we're going. For me, HR is a key element because it's about hiring the right person and making sure they fit within the team. They're going to be going to fit within that team quite quickly, especially when you're trying to grow. I guess the biggest pain point I've ever had of running a company is staff, because we're a staff-focused entity. But the amount of staff I've let go of instead of keep shows that we've got quite a bit wrong in that sense. So, you know, we brought in the right people, or we believe we brought in the right people, and that's what you can do. You might not like this, but it's the old adage of hire fast, fire faster.
No, I agree.
And it's mentally draining as a CEO, as a business owner, because someone can come in and if they don't really give two tosses about the company or the culture and they can be disruptive, you need to get rid of that person very, very quickly, because that then naturally has an impact on the wider team performance results, and you end up losing clients, you end up going backwards.
Yeah.
So, it's the support that we kind of need really is to make sure we set the, you know, expectations of what behavior, culture, its buzzword is from the beginning. We know what we're looking for in terms of hiring. The staff know what they're getting. It's creating everything we've just kind of talked about. But because we have such neurodivergent team, and I am myself very neurodivergent, it's like you've got to lead from the top, really. I've got to lead by example. So it's hard, because then when you get one problem child, you have to deal with it straight away, especially when you're a smaller team.
You can feel when the wrong person is in the business as well. And agencies and businesses alike need to be really fast with that. Like, it's all about being fair and reasonable, right? You know quite quickly if that person's values don't align with who you are as a business. And that's why, just like what you said, the hiring strategy, we should be asking questions in the interview process around our values. That is such a huge telltale.
You know what? We don't do that. We do have some really good questions.
You need to.
But we need to add more elements. But with the update, I got a question. With the update of what's come out from the budget.
Right.
Yeah. You're probably expecting a budget question, is it makes it a lot more harder for businesses to hire, especially with the laws they're introducing, which obviously benefit and should benefit employees, but from an employer perspective, I'm like thinking, no, I don't like this.
Specifically the budget or the employment law
changes.
So the employment law changes are actually not as complex and alarming as we first thought. So what they've said is nothing will change until 2026, which is like a sigh of relief for every employer. But all we can do now is start to build really good habits. So when Labour had their manifesto, they said they would bring in day one rights. It's now turned out as part of the proposed changes, it's a day one right, but there's going to be a probationary period of a suggested 9 months. So it's not a day one right, is what's proposed at the moment. It's 9 months. So what that basically means is as employers, we need to be building better habits around probationary periods to making sure we're having that regular conversation, we're building engagement, we're setting them up for success, but equally, it's their trial time to understand if we're the right environment for them as well. And that's totally okay if it doesn't work out. But we need to build better habits around when that 9 months ending, we have a conversation 2 weeks before that, we build it into our routine so that when that person is 9 months and 1 day, they don't have the rights they will have the rights, but we've got a process in place of where we know if that person is the right one for us. So the challenge is, Labour have said this is coming in no sooner than autumn 2026. In 2025, we've got the proposals that are going forward, so this could change again. So there's a lot happening, but between now and then, nothing's changing. So it's just about building good habits.
Okay.
I think that clears up a lot.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. It probably sets a lot of minds at ease, which is really, really valuable. The workplace has changed a lot over the last kind of 3, 4, 5 years.
Massive.
Looking into the future then, and I guess I'm particularly thinking in terms of like the agency model, what do you see kind of in the distance that might be on the cards over the next 5 years? We've touched on some stuff.
Yeah.
What else do you kind of think could affect the way that agencies work?
Another thing I would add is we need to focus on AQ. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Like a lot of us talk about like IQ, but we need to focus on AQ, which is adaptability quotient. So it's how adaptable we are as people, and we need to enable an environment where being adaptable is celebrated because there's so many perks. So it can encourage a team to embrace new challenges, to pivot really quickly, embrace new opportunities. We need to be more agile because the world of work is changing, and especially in agency environments as well. So having a focus on that is really important, and the agility of what organizational structures look like, really important in agencies. So typically, we may have like a pod approach, or we may have specialist functions as well. But there's such a rise now of fractional support. So like I support on a fractional basis. We've got fractional CMOs, CTOs, CFOs, all sorts. And that's what people in the future as agencies will be tapping into more regularly, tapping into those specialist skills as and when they need them. Yeah. Because we've got a generation, Gen Z, who around 75% of Gen Z don't aspire to be in a managerial role.
All right.
So when we have an entire generation who are less likely to want to be a manager, we need to adapt and be more agile in our infrastructure to custom them. So do we have more lateral moves rather than hierarchical? We've got to be more agile in how we're approaching it, because what works now will not work in 2-3 years' time, never mind 5.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting start.
The workplace of the future. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? There's one other thing that I wanted to ask you about as well, which is a big old subject to leave till last, and that is social media. I once got told off by HR for researching candidates on social media before doing interviews. They said, you can't do that, you can't do that. I'm like, I learn more about them from doing that than I do from whatever questions that I ask them in an interview. This is many years ago. I don't know what's kind of changed on that, but what effect does staff using HR? What's the effect of this from staff using social media? What's the effect from an HR point of view?
If I use your example around recruitment, a lot of policies now within them will say, if we look at a candidate's social profile, we will let them know. So for best practice, if any employers out there are looking at their social media before, tell the candidate that's what you're doing. It's also important that you don't put any unconscious bias or discrimination that prevents you from hiring that candidate. So as an example, if it's a female and you see on her social media that she's got children, that should not influence your decision to hire that candidate. So you've got to be very, very careful. And I do encourage anyone who is going to use social media.
All social media channels? Because we would, because most CVs have a link to the LinkedIn profile,
But they're offering that, right?
Yeah.
So they're putting it on their CV. But if you just,
never really look at someone's personal social
like their
media.
Facebook or their personal Instagram to see, it's completely different.
Yeah, but we would look at it more at the second stage before we do the personality test, as I call it. But there's also another element to like social media, which is how employees use social media whilst they're employed.
Yep. It improves employer brand, but I also think you need to remember that once you post online, it's on there forever. Yeah. So you've got to be incredibly happy with what you're writing online. And if you have a particular association with an agency, you have got to be taking personal responsibility for if you get any backlash of that way as well, and always maintaining a professional standard. If you're openly on your LinkedIn, as an example, adding your employer, that is going to add an instant association and connection to your business, and making sure that the content that you're posting is something that you would be happy with looking back even in a day's time.
Or in like years, because this is, in the great scheme of things, this is still relatively young, isn't it? In terms of, you sometimes get it with someone that ends up, in the public eye, and someone goes back and finds that, 15 years ago they posted this, that, and the other, and it had this to say. And that's still quite new, because it's kind of like it needs that time lapse for someone to actually do quite a bit of growing up. And they're probably sound now, but it's like once it's published, it is published, and that can come back to haunt you.
Yeah, I just think it's, if you're judging someone or something what they did 15 years ago and you can clearly see they're not that person anymore, then and you judge on that, then I think that's just complete stupidity. My view has always been you hire the best person for the role, which is why the first stage of any interview is technical questions about the job function and ability, and actually putting them under pressure with the type of questions I ask. Because I don't care about their background. I'm looking at, right, this is the job spec, this is the CV, right? So this is what we've said we're looking for in terms of technical ability. And that's the first pass metric more than anything else. We test everything else at the second stage. So the first
is that when you test culture?
Yeah, at the second stage. Not first, because the first stage is we want to get rid of people that we think can't do the job. If you can prove to me on the first stage interview, when I ask you all these technical questions, that means you're the right candidate. We know you can do the job.
Okay.
And that's what I'm paying you for. I'm paying you for your experience and ability to do SEO or paid social or paid search. So I need to know you understand these elements. So when I give you a difficult challenge or a client comes up with a problem, I know I'm paying you and you have the experience to deal with that at the same level as my other staff, etc. So that's the first thing we do. Then the second stage is anyone can nowadays use ChatGPT to answer questions and read off the right response or whatever it is. So we ask them to prove it. So we set them a couple of challenges. Not difficult, but they get 10 minutes to present a scenario, and then we queue with 5 minutes of Q&A, then another challenge, which is 10 minutes, and then Q&A. And then we move into the second stage of the interview where we ask, right, now this has got nothing to do about the job, the job, technical elements of the job. We want to learn about you now. So that's where we we get the ideas of can do the job, because that's what the job's based on. So how they do in probation period is like, no, you answered all these technical questions and said you can do it. You proved it in presentation. So if they don't deliver within the role, well, we can go back to, well, hang on, what's changed from your interview stage to your ability to do it now, because you were able to answer that technical question at that point. When we go to what the actual people questions is, it is more about very random questions. I'm not going to give away one of them because I love it, because I don't want anyone to pre-prepare and know I asked it. But we do ask questions like, what is your biggest failure today? Yeah.
Very good question. As you're going through, I'm just thinking, at what point are you asking them to tell you about their value alignment? I know you said around
That's where we should be adding it in.
That's what we need
Because I
to
said we
add
don't
in.
really add it in. We do need to add that in. But we do ask, why do they want to work here? We ask about their strengths and weaknesses. And we ask them if they could go back and change something in the past and they could do it differently. What would it be and why? And I'm not looking for work-related answers. I'm looking for personal-related answers. There are some other questions like, it's 12 p.m. exactly 1 year from now. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. And there's no right or wrong answer to these questions except one, because I want to see how they answer that question. It's how you answer that question that lets me know you have the cognitive thinking capability to really be successful in this industry, because it's so fast paced. And if there's no thought or process around that, you're going to fall down the pecking order. That's why I don't tell people what the question is.
I feel like you're teasing us a bit with that. You've got it once the mics are off. You've got to.
Yeah, you need to tell us.
I will tell you afterwards.
You've got to tell us.
But there's a logic to that question, and it's such a left-fielded question that it comes out of the blue, and they're like, you can see they struggle with it. But that's the whole point.
I also think that going back to the question around social media, you should be building a culture that you're really proud of and having a team who embody that culture in everything that they do. The whole culture should be baked into the entire employee life cycle. And if as part of your culture it is all around like trust, transparency, you are setting the tone for what people will know to write on their social media as well. Equally, people have freedom of speech, right? But there's a professional boundary, especially with platforms like LinkedIn.
I think LinkedIn is becoming way too much Instagram-y these days. There's a lot of selfies on there.
Nothing wrong with that.
I mean, I've had to host loads of selfies and actually getting some professional headshots because I'm like, these selfies need to level up. So
it's all personal brand.
I engage with your content because yours is like, you can see you're in the office or you've just come out of a client meeting. But why do I need to see you in the gym?
Yeah, I have a bugbear with the gym selfies.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, that's great for Instagram.
Blood, sweat and tears, isn't it?
No,
it's work-life balance.
It's borderline fake. We want realism, don't we?
Yeah.
And I get it, but that's borderline.
I think people are trying to show realism because of, gym being really important.
But it's coming across fake to me.
Yeah, fair.
So it's like you're trying to show realism, but you're coming across fake, and it kind of puts me off. It's like, I'd rather you just be honest. Don't get the perfect picture. It's not about the perfect picture. It's like, be real. Show us you're human, essentially.
You're right. There's a balance, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a balance.
Definitely a balance.
I think a lot of the content is, and it's becoming very video focused now, LinkedIn as well. But I agree. I think we have specific rules in terms of what Bobble as a company will post and not post about.
Yeah.
And we just say, when you're representing the company, remember you are representing the company. So if you're saying something public about a very, sensitive topic or issue, just be careful.
And you can build that into your onboarding process, right? When you're onboarding somebody into the business, you can set the tone around social media posting and their association with the agency too. It's all around transparency and just being super upfront and honest with your expectations.
Well said. Yeah. Well said. We're out of time, sadly. I've got one more question, but it's just a yes or no question. I want you both to answer this. Dogs in offices, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good answers.
No. Dogs,
Hell no
yes.
from me. Not a cat person.
And I said that because I knew that was going to rally you.
Yeah, I'm all for cats in offices. More cats, more offices.
This is a dog-friendly office. So you can bring dogs in here and you can have them in the office.
But not cats.
No, God,
discrimination.
No, it's not.
Get HR on the phone, someone. Get HR on the phone.
Can we build that into our values? No, can't. No, I'm joking. But you need to catch up with Laura. Is what we've learned from this. So honestly, thank you for coming on. It's been really insightful.
Thank you.
It's been really good. I hope everyone listening has got some insights. And if you have any more questions, all of Georgia's information will be shared and tagged into all the snippets and stuff. Do follow Access HR. Her content's really good. Do follow her on LinkedIn. She's really educational and informative. That's how, this all came about. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode. Cheers.